over $3.7 trillion in assets, more than 5,100 branches, and over 250,000 employees. This is the largest bank in the US. This is JPMorgan Chase. JPMorgan's authority and power are undeniable, but did JPMorgan Chase become one of the largest banks of the world? Who stands behind its success? And how could a powerful financial institution begin as a purified water company supplier to New York residents? And now, prepare for a little time travel as we're going back to the late 19th centuries, to the times when the US was not yet one of the world's largest economy and the American market was still an emerging one. There, on Wall Street, in a small banking firm, you could find a young yet promising man, John Pierpont Morgan. He was strongly influenced by his father, Junius Morgan, who was an established banker. In the early 1850s, Junius met a partner in a London-based firm, which gave him access to European wealth. So he wanted his son to find new connections and discover investment opportunities in the American market. And while JPMorgan Chase was built on the foundation of over 1,200 predecessor institutions, none will deny the importance of John Pierpont Morgan's figure. So let's go back to the proactive young man who wasn't really inspired much by working as a Wall Street clerk. That's why in 1861, he started his very first firm and promptly grew his reputation as a trustworthy American banker. The timing was perfect. The American economy was finally facing a real boom after the end of the Civil War. However, by the age of 33, JP Morgan was already tired of the banking industry altogether. And if it wasn't because of his father, the young man would have quit. But Junius Morgan wouldn't let this happen. So he offered his son a new partnership with an experienced Philadelphia banker, Anthony Drexel. And this is how Drexel, Morgan & Co. was established in 1871, and 24 years later, the company transformed into JP Morgan & Co. At that time, JP Morgan was actively investing in the railroad and became one of the industry leaders known for his result-driven approach. He wouldn't passively own stocks, but played an active role in corporate management. At the beginning of the 20th century, Morgan reached new career peaks. He decided to take on the steel industry and repeat the scenario used with the railroad and consolidate many small businesses into one giant one. For this, JP Morgan bought Andrew Carnegie's steel company. And in 1901, he formed the United States Steel Corporation, valued at $1.4 billion, making it the world's first billion-dollar corporation. The same year, JP Morgan merged two of the largest U.S. railroads into the Northern Securities Company, but it didn't last long. The company was sued and dissolved under Roosevelt's presidency to avoid railroad monopoly. At that point, the public began to fear JP Morgan's power. Some were saying that he was close to owning the United States of America. Two American presidents asked the banker to save the national economy during the crisis, including Roosevelt, who ironically prosecuted Morgan. His influence was undeniable, and the day of JP Morgan's funeral, the New York Stock Exchange closed until noon. This was a type of honor generally reserved for heads of states only. After the death of John Pierpont Morgan in 1913, his son Jack stepped up as a senior partner, and the company continued to grow actively. By the 1920s, JP Morgan was one of the leading banks in the world. The company expanded its presence not only in the US, but also in Europe and beyond. And even though John Pierpont Morgan played a remarkable role in JP Morgan's Chase history, there was also another half of the story. And it dates back to 1799, when the Manhattan Company was founded. At that time, New York residents had limited access to clean water, which led to the quick disease spread and severe yellow fever epidemic. That was when Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr decided to improve the sanitary situation and establish a purified water supplier, the Manhattan Company. First, you might see no connection between a water supplier and the banking industry. However, you have to know that getting a banking license back in the days was tough. That's why when approving a charter for the water company opening, Hamilton and Burr added an unusual clause that allowed them to start a bank. And one way or the other, this charter was accepted by the city governor. So within just 16 months, the Bank of Manhattan Company was born. Interesting, the Manhattan Company's charter became a popular template for a less complicated bank opening. Later on, another player, the chemical bank, emerged. It also started far from finances, producing medicines, paint, and dyes under the name of New York Chemical Manufacturing Company. Over the next century, both the Bank of Manhattan Company and the Chemical Bank went through several mergers. The most notable ones were in 1955, when the Bank of Manhattan Company and Chase National Bank, the third largest in the US, merged into Chase Manhattan Bank. And in 1996, when Chemical Bank merged with Chase Manhattan to become the biggest US banking company with nearly $300 billion in assets. Besides multiple financial mergers, the second half of the 20th century was characterized by rapid development of the banking industry. Several new technologies emerged, such as electronic banking, credit cards, and ATMs, and Chase Manhattan Bank was one of the most distinguished pioneers. No wonder why, in the year of 2000, jpmorgan merged with Chase Manhattan to become the brand we know today, JPMorgan Chase & Co., one of the largest banks in the world. But the consolidation didn't stop there. In 2004, JPMorgan merged with Bank One, growing even larger. As you can see on the screen, JPMorgan and its predecessors were involved in almost 1/4 of all the notable bank mergers over the last century.
Lehman Brothers, a 158-year-old firm, filed for bankruptcy.
When the 2008 financial crisis hit, JPMorgan Chase was better prepared than most. Harvard Business Review even noted that it was perhaps the healthiest of America's big banks. Nevertheless, JPMorgan Chase accepted a $25 billion bailout from the Federal Reserve. The total bailout bill for the financial system reached $700 billion that year. You see, JPMorgan Chase's situation was far from bad. The bank was even encouraged to help save the economy by acquiring two companies on the edge of collapse, Bear Stearns and Washington Mutual, also known as WAMU. In a later interview by CNBC, Jamie Dimon, JPMorgan Chase CEO, revealed that buying Bear Stearns was a mistake.
I would not have done Bear Stearns.
Even in the financial storm, JPMorgan Chase stood still and continued developing. Numbers prove it. And if we take a look at stocks, JPMorgan's growth consistently outperforms the NASDAQ since 2009. But of course, like any financial institution, JPMorgan Chase was also involved in several scandals. But this is a topic for another episode. This was the centuries-long history of one of the most influential banks in the world. What surprised you the most? Let us know down in the comments. And feel free to check out this episode right here on the screen.